Terminal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good.
Throttling up. Roger roll with Planet.
Water towers can fly!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight down by SC off. Say again, SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening, morning, afternoon, night, wherever it is where you are around the world. Hello and welcome to Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where you are looking live at a Falcon 9 rocket that has 40 internet satellites tucked inside of it. And internet satellites, Falcon 9, must be Starlink. No, it is OneWeb today. This is the first of 3 missions that SpaceX has for OneWeb and their space-based internet constellation of satellites in polar orbits. So we will be going over all of that today. And as you can see, we've just ticked below 40 minutes in the count. So let's start with introductions here for those who are on the stream. I am Chris Gebhardt. I am the Assistant Managing Editor for NASASpaceflight, and I'll be your host today as we go through this countdown and launch of the Falcon 9. Also joining me on comms today is Mr. Alex. Alex, how is it going?
It's going really well. I'm really looking forward to today's launch. It should be exciting.
It should be for more than one reason. It's not just the satellites, it's also the trajectory and the booster landing and the sunset angles. So much to talk about here today. But Alex, thank you for joining us. Also, behind the scenes producing today, we have Mr. Kevin Michael Reed. Thank you so much for the production here today, Kevin. And also behind the scenes, not operating the stream today, but operating the auto track camera and monitoring all of that is Mr. Michael Baylor. And then on the ground at the Kennedy Space Center with his eye on the rocket is Mr. Sawyer Rosenstein. Sawyer, how's it going out at my happiest place on Earth?
You and me both. It is going absolutely fantastic here. I could say this is a lot better than the last time I was here for an RTLS in that I can actually see the rocket.
Well, yes, the weather is much better than when the Falcon Heavy decided to fly for the first time in several years under the NRO fog machine. Yes, but that is definitely that reference. But we've got a great team here to bring you through this launch here tonight. We are at 37 minutes, 40 seconds and counting, approaching the start of the auto sequence. Right now, SpaceX is performing an electronic go, no go poll of the people in the firing room controlling and monitoring the count. But once the auto sequence begins, everything is very automated and sequenced for the Falcon 9. And that is also when its RP-1 and densified liquid oxygen will begin flowing into the rocket. But before we get to that, Sawyer, I would like to throw our first question to you, which is, what is this mission's purpose? What is going to space today?
Well, what is going to space today is, as you mentioned, 40 internet satellites for the company OneWeb. These satellites were built in cooperation with Airbus as well. And this is a continuation of the OneWeb internet satellite network that up until now has been launched primarily on Soyuz rockets. Those were discontinued after the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the war began. They have also launched occasionally on Indian rockets, but this is their first of 3 now scheduled to launch aboard a Falcon 9. And in an unusual trajectory from Launch Complex 39A, this one will actually be going south-southeast and doglegging around the Cape and around Cuba and over populated areas to get into its 87.9 degree orbit.
Yes, indeed. And I know we're getting questions on the payloads and everything here too, but there's some other stuff I want to talk about here too, because Sawyer, Yes, like we're getting a good question here from James Atkinson, who is asking about the dog leg, which you just mentioned. Yep, bending around Florida for that particular trajectory. Thank you very much for the question, James. Brian asking about the overall trajectory at takeoff, which, as you said, is to the south-southeast. So unfortunately, Kristen, your question about with the polar orbit today, will it go up the east coast like the Starlink launches? No. So actually, in order to get into the polar orbits from Florida, you have to go south. The orbits the Starlinks go into, are 53 degrees, and when they launch northeast, and you can get to about 57 launching northeast from Florida before you would be overflying Washington, D.C., and New York City, and Boston, and that's a no-no. So the only way to get polar from Florida is to go south and bend around the Florida Peninsula. But here is the question, and Alex, I kind of want to throw this one to you. Liftoff is at 5:27. Sunset is just before that. Are we in the jellyfish territory, or does the polar corridor affect that in some way?
That's a good question. I'm really looking forward to see what it looks like, but it's certainly going to be weird because the rocket will basically be seen from Florida as going sideways, because you're seeing it basically from the side, and the way that it's actually flying sort of like along the Terminator line, basically the line between day and night. So it's going to be very, very peculiar of a flight in terms of the jellyfish. Will it happen? Will it be that it's always in daylights for some reason or something? We will see.
We will.
It's certainly going to be interesting.
And one thing to really look for is, because this will be, the camera angles will all be between the rocket and the setting sun, or the already set sun, is the plume interaction. Because the other big question here today is coming in saying, is this landing at LZ1? And that's correct, because it's a return to launch site landing tonight. So it is a sunset polar corridor return to launch site landing with the potential of a jellyfish. And we'll definitely get plume interaction between the igniting second stage and when the booster flips around to do its boostback burn to send it back to the Cape. So there's a lot to watch for tonight. And man, if you can run outside and look, this could be really spectacular if you are in Florida and even South Florida, especially down toward West Palm Beach and Miami. This is coming down your way as it arcs to the south. So really a good thing to look for here. And also, that allowed a lot of our questions to start coming in. So if you do have a question, make sure to tag us at NASASpaceflight in chat. That helps us see the question a little bit easier with some magic software Michael wrote that lets it come right to a desktop screen that I have here. And yes, so go ahead and ask your questions and tag us at NASASpaceflight in that chat. And Alex, I actually have another question here for you that's coming from Vakos, who is asking, how many return to launch site or RTLS landings have we seen in 2022 so far?
Yes, so this will be the 5th landing on LC1 this year. Landing zone 1, it will be the 6th at the Cape, because there's been one at landing zone 2 with that Falcon Heavy flight, and there's been at least 3 RTLS missions from Vandenberg. So overall, this is the 9th RTLS landing this year, and there's gonna be more coming this month. We'll have Hakuto R, which is landing on LC2, by the way, and then SWAT from Vandenberg is also landing back at LC4 at Vandenberg. So that's going to be all 3 paths being used this month. So there you go.
Yeah, and wow, like if the launch schedules actually hold for all of those, like within a week, 3 RTLS landings to the 3 landing zones in a week. That's neat, especially the dual ones in Florida. That's a cool alignment there.
And then there's also another 2 flights. There's Transporter 6. Yeah, there's Transporter 6 from here from Florida, from Sleep 40 later in the month, which is also doing a landing zone, basically an RTLS, coming back to LC1. And then there's also another Vandy flight. It's still on the 29th of December, so it might slip to January, but still, it's quite impressive that, there's another Vandenberg flight, and it is also an RTLS landing late this month. So too
Really
many
neat.
RTLS missions lately.
Oh,
There's
but they're
no
so
such
cool.
thing.
Exactly, Sawyer. There's no such thing. There's no such thing.
Also, one
And-
thing, now that I'm seeing the
oh, yep.
poll here, we have a poll on YouTube, by the way, with the South Polar Corridor. Hi, Jack, by the way. And the funny thing, well, not funny, but like curious thing today is that this is the first time they're using this polar corridor from 39A. So previously they have used this corridor from Slick 40, and we kind of thought that that was probably because ULA is in the way. There's Slick 41 north of Slick 40, so you probably want to use the southeast one of the two paths that they have. But this is actually the first one that they do from 39A, the first use of that polar corridor.
Indeed. So this will actually be like from a liftoff to orbit insertion standpoint, the highest inclination mission from 39A in its history. Yep. Its previous record was 63 degrees when Shuttle Atlantis had to do a dogleg maneuver on a Department of Defense flight. In
Shuttle.
1992, I believe. 91 or 92, I believe that was. But anyway, yes, more questions coming in. Thank you so much for everyone who is joining us. Good question here from TFD. Launch now? Good question. 29 minutes, 27 seconds away. Liftoff tonight is planned for 5:27 and 48 seconds local time at the launch site in Florida, which is 22:27 and 48 seconds UTC. And that is basically just around or just after sunset local time here, which is very nice. Another good question here from James Atkins, who is asking how many flights for this booster. This is booster 1069, and it is the 4th flight, so a relatively youngin, as would be said in the US. Booster here. Its previous flights included CRS-24, Starlink Group 4-23, and the Hotbird 13F mission. So thank you very much there.
Poor booster.
I know, right?
It had that first flight. Oh man. Hopefully today will be better.
Indeed. Indeed.
I say you could probably lean on it being better this time.
So Sawyer, let's kick this one
There
to
we
you.
go.
For those who aren't familiar with the joke, Booster 1069's first flight was the CRS-24 mission, and we're making some leaning jokes. What happened to it?
Well, it landed successfully on the drone ship, and as it was towed back into port, you could see it even on our fleet cam, which is available 24/7, NASASpaceflight. It was leaning after what appears to be a slightly hard-ish landing, and some of the absorbing shockers that are built into the landing legs, thankfully taking the brunt so it didn't damage the booster as much, but it still was a hard landing, came in leaning sideways, and I believe it took about 250 days between flights for that refurbishment, whereas this one you're talking a little over a month and a half.
Gotcha. And a good question here coming in from Tommy. Is OneWeb a Starlink competitor? Alex.
Well, sort of, and also sort of not. It's a little bit complicated because they basically kind of do the same, but they support different customers, and that's sort of the difference here. Where, is it really a competition? It is in the sense of Starlink, and we see that recently. Starlink can be spun off to be used for government customers. Actually, we've seen the recent release, so to speak, of that new website by SpaceX with the Star Shield kind of component for Starlink, and so that is more probably closer to being a competitor to OneWeb than Starlink per se. But yeah, it's sort of like in that thin line in between yes and no. I guess it's yes, but no. there's some caveats.
Yeah, also of note, right now OneWeb is the second largest internet constellation in low Earth orbit.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. All right, and 714 Metal Detecting, thank you so much for the support. Very much appreciated. JD Brown, thank you very much for the support, asking What is the maximum number of boosters SpaceX is allowed to have per rocket reusability rules and regulations?
I'm not sure there's
I don't
any
think that's a
regulation
thing.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's a thing. Yeah. Moldy Space Industries, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Very, very. Oh wow! I was so thankful there. Like English sort of escaped my brain there for a minute. Thank you very much for that. And if you were one of the people who were gifted one of those 5 Red Team memberships from Moldy Space Industries, let us know in chat. We also always like to know who received one of those gifts as well. Jim Cavett as well, gifting 1 Red Team membership. So if you got a Red Team membership from Jim, let us know as well. And I like this. Cinnamon Control saying, go Internet Rocket Go? Because that's what we usually say when it's a Falcon 9 with Starlinks on it. And yes, I will say that today too. Go Internet Rocket Go.
And by the way, for everyone who's joining as members, I've got some cool video cameras set up for this one that may appear as a member video. Yeah, I don't know.
Yes, indeed. Some very interesting photography possible here, for some elements of the mission. But yes, at T-minus 24 minutes, 30 seconds and counting here, we are counting down here and monitoring the launch and countdown of the OneWeb 15 mission, which is launching on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from good old Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. And on board are 40 OneWeb satellites. So got a couple of questions. A good question here from Richard Palmer. Since there are 40 OneWeb satellites on board today's Falcon 9, how many could the Soyuz take up? The Soyuz could take up 34 to 36, and then we just saw the GSLV also take up a batch in the mid-30s here a couple of weeks ago. So Falcon 9 definitely the leader in that regard in terms of how many it can take into orbit and still perform a return to launch site landing with a dogleg maneuver that costs you propellant and efficiency. Not that they're flexing or anything. With that, but yeah, with that, but yes. But anyway, with about 23 and a half minutes to go, all systems are still looking good per a very, very quiet countdown net and mission control audio loop from SpaceX. You can see some vapors around the first stage of Falcon 9. The first stage right now is being fueled with RP1 kerosene and densified liquid oxygen. They pack this into the Falcon 9 at the very last moment. It's called load and go, and fueling wraps up about 2 minutes prior to liftoff. A big event that we will have coming up here, actually. The second stage, the whiter portion of the stage above the big black strip there, about 3/4 of the way up the rocket. That second stage is currently being filled only with RP1 kerosene. And at 22 minutes, T-minus 22 minutes, that loading operation wraps up for RP1 kerosene. And then at 20 minutes and 20 seconds, we will see a big vent from the transporter erector as they purge those lines and get ready for a changeover to load liquid oxygen into the second stage as well. So that's a big milestone that we'll be looking for here in about 2 minutes' time. But until then, Alex, here's a question. Since it's just off screen right here, Jake is asking, I know this is a historic pad, but I still don't understand why they built the Starship tower so close on the same pad. And there it is.
Well, it's the only place right now that they can build such a huge complex. Launch Complex 39A is really big. If you see the footprint of the Starship pad, it's actually not that big compared to this place. And I'm really sure if you didn't mind having, like, if you remove the pad egress system on the west side of the complex, you could probably do another copy of the Starship pad. It's a big, huge complex. Complex 39A is really big. So that's the only place that they could put Starship without having to actually make a whole new complex out of the blue, just from complete scratch. So that's at least what made sense. And we've seen them at least trying the differences here from how the pad is built at Starbase. We're seeing here, for example, they have a huge deluge ring with dozens and dozens of pipes that will dump a lot of water down onto the launch mount. And we should be coming up here soon on that T-minus 20-minute vent that Chris mentioned before. And yeah, the placement, the location, it's the only place that they could put it in such a way that they could protect at least that Falcon asset. But here is that T-minus 20-minute vent. I just heard from the countdown nets that call out that stage 2 RP1 load is complete.
And there we go, and that is Falcon 9's visual cue right now that it is happy, it is healthy, and it is getting all of its propellants that it needs to affect the on-time liftoff here that is expected at 5:27 and 48 seconds local time here in Florida. But until then, we are taking your questions, and we are marching through the countdown here, monitoring how that is going. And Sawyer, I got a good question here for you from Johnny McWilliams. And Johnny's asking, why don't they carry more satellites and just land on the barge?
Good question. And a lot of it may not necessarily have to do with where they want to land the booster, but so much as how many satellites you can fit inside the payload as well. This is, again, as you mentioned, the most OneWeb satellites that have been launched inside any vehicle so far, with 40. And they are packed pretty tight. Yeah. Oh yeah, they are packed pretty darn tight, and it's a way to make sure that you get as many in there still as possible, while still allowing them to spread out and deploy safely, as well as if you've got the extra, boost back opportunity, SpaceX is absolutely going to take it.
Yeah, and a lot of this too is like, right, you can pack more Starlinks into the Falcon 9 payload fairing than you can OneWebs, because the Starlinks are flat satellite designs, so you can stack more of them in that volume, and they're also designed to deploy and be able to jostle around, whereas the OneWebs have to deploy and move away from one another. They're not meant to collide with one another like the Starlinks are, and you can see, they're just a different design, and sometimes it's, like you said, Sawyer, volume, not mass.
Another thing, this OneWeb satellites were also made sort of that they could probably fit in most of the conventional ferrying sizes that we see nowadays, and most payload dispensers and things like that. The payload dispenser here that we see, it's actually made by SpaceX. It didn't took them too long, and even just I believe when OneWeb first released some images of them mating the satellites to the dispensers, I look at them and they look really similar to the ones that SpaceX already uses for transporter missions that are called like plates, that they call them. They might be slightly modified for the OneWeb satellites, but they certainly used some commonality there, where the Starlink satellites, obviously, they are flat packed, they have their own deployment system with their tension rods and all of that. So it's made especially for Falcon 9, whereas this is a little bit more general. So that design trade-off is also one of the things that comes into play here as well.
Gotcha. And Alex as well. So we mentioned this is the first flight of OneWeb satellites on SpaceX Falcon 9 rockets. How many launches did OneWeb contract SpaceX for?
3.5. So there's a kick here because there's 3 full launches, and then there's supposed to be a rideshare mission later down the line. Still not sure whether that's gonna be with, we've seen them launching these satellites when they do rideshare satellites missions. They usually do that sometimes even with Starlinks or maybe with transporter missions. But the kind of orbit that these satellites are going are more similar to Iridium, for example. In Iridium, we know they have also a mission here for SpaceX that is also supposed to be a rideshare. So, that seems like the good companion for these satellites on that rideshare mission.
Yeah, the inclinations are also different between the OneWeb constellation and the polar inclinations that the Starlinks are sort of targeting with their orbiter shells as well, which is probably another indication that it's like you said, Iridium is a good possibility for that as well. Sawyer, a good question here for you from Kane, who's asking, what number launches this for SpaceX this year, and any projections on how many they could end with?
I believe, if I recall correctly, this is their 55th launch this year, if you combine Vandenberg as well as here at the Cape. This is the
Indeed.
52nd launch of any rocket, by the way, this year from Cape Canaveral, which is, shocker, a record for the Cape at this point by a long shot. So, yeah, that's about one a week here, which is insane to believe. And as for predictions, I know we have at least 4 or 5 more launches that are scheduled to occur sometime this December, including Hokuto R. There's another SES launch. You've got SWAT, possibly another Starlink, possibly another transporter mission. So possibly 60 this year. It'll be close.
So just shy or right at 60. There we go. Very good. And here's a good question as well, coming in asking, why is the NOTAM, the Notice to Airmen, a half circle to the east and not a full circle? It's a great question. It's because they don't close the airspace over Titusville and on the mainland parts of Florida for these. They're really only concerned with the airspace in the direction that the rocket is traveling, because if there should be a mishap, or an activation of the autonomous flight termination system, you don't want aircraft in that area and interfering with the rocket. But the airspace closure that extends out to the west is just basically a buffer zone for where debris might fall, and other than that, there's no reason to close it, so they don't. So it's only a half circle. All right, and Alan C is gifted 1 Red Team membership. Thank you so much. If you did get one of those, if you did get Alan's gifted Red Team membership, please let us know. We definitely love to see all of that. Jay is asking, how are they going to roll out Starship at 39A? Well, basically, they will. There's a little road that parallels the crawlerway as it goes out toward 39A, and then the split to go off to 39B. And basically, the Starship segments, whether they come in through the turn basin here, and then dock at the turn basin site here at the press site, and then they have access to that road to go out to the launch site. And then when they are built here in Florida, they will also use the road network in Florida, and that is how they will be transported out.
Same way they transport the tower segments.
Yes, exactly. Same way they transported the tower segments. Exactly. That same road that goes by the crawlerway. Yep. Christopher Jeanette, thank you for becoming a Capcom member. Oh, I see, at Capcom. See, what this means is that Chris J, because, you know, got to keep with the theme. Chris J loves our voices and our banter so much so that he would like it 24/7 in their life. And they have become a Capcom member, which means access to our Discord, which means you have access to our wonderful jokes 24/7. So thank you very much, Chris, for that continued support, because that continued support really does mean a lot to us. It's a lot of, how we keep the lights on, bring you these new camera angles, upgrade our equipment, get ready for our coverage of the orbital test flight of Starship next year. And everything like that. So thank you very much. That support really does mean a lot to us. William Hart, thank you so much for gifting 5 Red Team memberships as well. My gosh. Chris R. See, I'm just going to go with all the Chris's are now going to get their last names just with the letters to keep everything in family. So Chris R. saying thank you guys. On brand, thank you. That's the word I could not think of there for that moment. So Chris R. saying, thank you guys for the awesome live streams. Enjoy all of them and nice work. Thank you very much, Chris. Roy saying, will FleetCam be able to pan up and watch the rocket pass overhead? FleetCam will definitely be able to see it, as will the cameras on that we have now permanently at the Kennedy Space Center that are a part of Space Coast Live. So if you're ever wondering what's going on at the Kennedy Space Center, like where the mobile launch platform is, or where the mobile launcher is for SLS, That's rolling back. And on the crawlerway, you can hop on over to Space Coast Live on our YouTube channel and check out the live happenings around Kennedy Space Center. Interestingly enough, Blue Origin was doing some fairing practice at the Turn Basin there at the Kennedy Space Center this week, and that was very nice to see as well. And another good question here from Radical Isotope asking why 48 seconds at T0? And Sawyer, this has to do not just with the orbital inclination they're trying to hit, but with the plane they're trying to launch into as well, correct?
I believe so. Yeah, it's again, we have the interesting trajectory that we are going south-southeast in a polar launch here from 39A, and again, these seconds all come down to exact timing of orbital mechanics of when the satellites can go into the exact place that they need to be in terms of inclination, as you mentioned, as well as just location based, so that they can then hit their targeted orbit and provide the coverage for the area that OneWeb is attempting to provide for.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And, speaking of proper timing, we all
Oh, that was good.
need to be reminded sometimes, if you're like me, of like what day of the week it is. Sometimes when when you get into your head like that and you're just like, I don't know, it feels like a Tuesday, but it's Wednesday. And see, I said all of that and it's actually Thursday today. So hooray. See, I'm doing good. I need one of these things. I need one of our calendars. Because not only, if you're like me, does it draw your eye to what day of the week it is, the flashy photographs actually help keep my concentration a little bit more on this. I really hope you guys are enjoying this. But no, seriously, if you haven't already, do check out our 2023 calendars. There's still more than enough time to purchase them before the end of the year. They look great on any wall, especially in your space-themed office. And I think everyone can agree that, work needs to see all of these really cool things that are happening in spaceflight, right? Like your colleagues need to be aware that like really cool stuff's happening with Starship and SLS and Falcon 9 and all the other rocket families that we have out there. So definitely check that out in our store, shop.nasaspaceflight.com. And remember too, each calendar, if you buy it individually, is $40. But if you buy them together as a bundle, that is discounted to $60 for both of them. And shipping on the calendars is free. So just bear that in mind. If you do put other items with the calendar in the shop, you will be charged shipping only for the non-calendar items. But all the calendar items are completely free for shipping. And again, there is that discount if you buy them both. So definitely head on over there and check that out. And we do recommend buying before December 12th, just to ensure that you can have that before the new year. And also, speaking of things before the new year, we also have our line of Christmas merchandise and holiday merchandise that is available as well, including the awesome Mars SpaceX design that you can get in sweatshirt, sweater, shirt, mug, mouse pad, but definitely a lot of Easter eggs in that too. And you can see it's not just in winter weather sweatshirt material, it's also in t-shirts, because we do remember our warm climate friends this time of year. But definitely a lot of Easter eggs in this wonderful Mars SpaceX themed holiday attire designed by the wonderfully talented Pauline Acklin. So thank you very much, Pauline. And if you want to check that out, please do. And speaking of time, with 7 minutes to go, Falcon 9 is now in chill down. Ha! Timed that perfectly.
Boom! There it is.
Indeed. Sawyer, do you want to take us through what we can expect in the final moments of the countdown and then the liftoff today?
Sure thing. So, again, as you mentioned, we are currently in the chill down portion of it right now. Everything's getting cool and up to flight temperatures, so that once it gets the really hot temperatures at ignition, you don't get any of those thermal shocks that could cause unnecessary RUDs or bad things. In about 4.5 minutes, we will see the transporter erector, the TE, that big long white structure, start to retract backwards away from the rocket. Fuel should be done in about T-minus 2 minutes till liftoff. And then at T-minus 1 minute, that is when Falcon 9 enters startup. That is when the flight computers will take complete control of the rocket, and at that point, all of the propellant tanks will then get pressurized to their flight levels. And that's the big thing until we get the official go at T-minus 45 seconds. And then the command to light the 9 Merlin 1D engines is at T-minus 3 seconds, getting all the engines up to full throttle before then lifting off and beginning its dogleg turn. And once we get to about a minute 12 seconds into flight is when we will hit max Q. That's the maximum pressure that is exerted on the vehicle. And then we will get shutdown of the first stage, separation, and second stage ignition at around 2 minutes and 17 seconds into flight. That's also about when the first stage will then do its 180-degree turn and burn to slow itself down as it heads back towards LZ1, of which there are 2 more burns, one about 6 minutes and 4 seconds called the entry burn, and then you have the landing burn, which at about 8 minutes after liftoff will have the first boost. We'll have the booster back at landing zone 1, and around that time is when OneWeb will also enter its preliminary parking orbit. How'd I do with my memory?
You did very, very well on the memory there, Sawyer. That was spot on. And it is about that 2.5 minute mark that we are standing by for that stage separation. The booster flips around, reignites 3 of its engines. That's when we're expecting that plume interaction. And given the fact that we are right now at sunset local time at the Kennedy Space Center, this could be very visually stunning. It is also very clear skies across the Florida Peninsula right now, so lots of people will be able to see this. This could be a really, really good show. Remember, the trajectory today is south toward Cuba. This is a polar launch from Launch Complex 39A, attempting to get into an 87.4 degree inclination orbit. To do that from Florida, you must go south. So if you are specifically Melbourne, West Palm Beach, Port St. Lucie, Miami, this is going to be very visible for you, and it might do that wonderful jellyfish effect that these flights do in the twilight. So definitely worth stepping outside to watch, as we are now 3.5 minutes away from the scheduled launch of 40 OneWeb satellites on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket.
And at this moment, I'm going to step away and let you and Alex take over until launch. I will try and pop in again, maybe between launch and landing, if not, certainly after.
Thank you, Sawyer. Enjoy the liftoff. I know Thomas is also standing by with another camera from another vantage point, because remember, this is a return to launch site landing of Booster 1069 after liftoff. But before we do that, I really must take a moment to stop and thank Beth Sanders for the $200 super chat that just says, keep up the good work. Beth, from everyone at NSF, thank you so much. That is an amount that surely stuns us and humbles us. This is meant with all the sincerity in the world, and I know it cannot sound that way, but thank you so much. That means so much to us and what we do. Thank you very much. And also, Marcus Sullivan, thank you for becoming a flight engineer member, one of the very upper levels of membership. Thank you. That recurring membership means an awful lot to us as well. And Caden, thank you for the Red Team membership as well. Thank you all so much for that vote of confidence and support, and for that continuing membership. And right now, Alex, we are about 2 minutes away from liftoff. So we are about to see the final purge and then the final startup sequence for Falcon 9 here, correct?
Indeed. They are wrapping up LUX load on the second stage. There we go. I just heard the call out that LUX load is complete on the second stage. So now the tanks are... Basically, all the tanks are fully loaded right now. They're draining the strom bag, as we see there, with a vent purge. And in about 34 seconds, the ground computers are going to hand off the control of the countdown to the onboard flight computers. And that's going to be the Falcon 9 when the Falcon 9 enters into startup mode. Also, the same time when the first stage tanks and second stage tanks are also pressed for flight.
Indeed, that's all coming up here in the next 10 seconds. And really quickly, just thank you to Mayflower for becoming a launch director member, one of our highest membership levels as well. Thank you very much for that continued support. T-minus 60 seconds now and counting to the launch of Falcon 9.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Indeed, that Falcon 9 has taken control of its countdown and its tanks are pressurizing to flight levels. And right now we should have the go for launch from the launch director. There we go. Perfect. So 40 seconds to go, folks. Remember, this is a return to launch site landing for the booster. Sunset was just a few minutes ago. This should be visually stunning in the skies over Florida today. So here we go. 22 seconds and counting. Minus 10 seconds. Everything getting ready on the launch pad there. T-minus 3 seconds. We should have had engine start. There we go. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket carrying 40 OneWeb satellites for an internet constellation in space and the first polar launch from the Kennedy Space Center. And look at those gorgeous views and that sound as Falcon 9 thunders out from the Kennedy Space Center, now going through max Q, the area, the moment of maximum dynamic pressure on the rocket.
These are really cool views. I cannot get tired of any of this.
I know. Alex, I'm going to be really mean to you and say, I'm going to go outside. I want to see this with my own eyes. I'm going to be gone for a minute, take over commentary, but look at these incredible tracking views.
It's amazing. Look at that plume expanding. I always love that.
And that is a WD-40's camera. This is a friend of NASASpaceflight and our channel. This is a tracking view that he has from down south. Absolutely gorgeous.
We should be coming up soon in that MECO stage separation and MVAC ignition process, but after that, there's going to be a boostback burn. Such a great tracking here. And that's MECO. Looks like MVAC ignition. Oh, there goes the flip. And boostback burn. Oh, look at that. The interaction between the booster and the MVAC engine, that's always so amazing. We're seeing there the views from SpaceX of the flights. It looks like it's going well. Oh, look at that. More ground views.
Oh my gosh, I have never witnessed one from up in Daytona before. That was gorgeous to see. Thank you for letting me step away.
Always. You should.
So this is
it's amazing.
This is the auto track, and this is, I believe, Dr. WD-40's.
And I've just heard fairing separation confirmed.
Yeah. But look at those cold gas thrusters firing on the booster as it comes back. This is exactly the visual setup we were hoping for, with the just set sun and climbing back into daylight. Oh, these are the gorgeous, gorgeous launches.
Look at the ripples in like the thrusters, the ripples that they do, and it's
in person, Alex, they look like Wi-Fi signals.
like
they really
like
do.
The Wi-Fi signal logo.
And this is incredible. This is Michael's AI tracking bot that has kept the lock on it so far. This is oh my gosh, this is so cool. This is so cool. And yeah, those cold gas thrusters pulsing in the upper atmosphere like that. Alex, how high up is the booster right now?
It should be about 120 kilometers right now.
Okay. So this is about as high. If it's 120 kilometers right now.
Yeah, it's coming down already.
Yeah, so that's about the altitude that we say entry interface. So like when Orion comes back into the atmosphere later this weekend, 121 kilometers is entry interface. So that's how high this booster is right now.
Look at that.
Oh my gosh. Look at And this is the booster getting ready ahead of its entry burn. That'll be the next, and that's a 3. First they light the center, and then the 2 outer ones light as well for the entry burn. And there's oh my gosh, look at that. And you can see the second stage still firing to take the payloads into orbit. Just a little bit of ice that came off the engine there, totally normal. And you can see that first stage plummeting back into the atmosphere now. Oh, wow. There it comes.
And it looks like a carpet when it comes down through the re-entry burn.
It does, and after the re-entry, after the entry burn is done, it will have a little smoke trail that follows it there as well, and then of course there are the sonic booms.
Oh, there we go. One
go.
engine and 3 engines.
There we go. This is the entry burn of booster 1069 coming back to Cape Canaveral after a launch 6.5 minutes ago from Launch Complex 39A. And that entry burn complete, the booster now falling down toward just offshore of the landing zone. Landing zone 1 is the target for today. Again, the second stage continuing to take the 41 OneWeb satellites into orbit, but this is the booster coming back for its return to launch site landing. And look at it passing through. It's getting orange. Look at it passing through the sunset. It's passing through the sunset as it's coming back. Look at that.
It's amazing. Oh my gosh.
Look at this. All right, and the next thing will be the reignition of the center Merlin engine for the landing burn, and then the deployment of the landing legs. But look at this.
Come on.
Oh,
there we go.
There we go.
Landing burn.
Oh, wow, 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 wow. There it is from the Kennedy Space Center going below the tree line. And here we go for landing.
Landed.
Wow. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That was booster 1069 doing a sunset return to launch site landing at the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That was absolutely incredible. That was a brief graphic of where stage 2 actually was. It is still firing to take the OneWeb satellites into orbit, but it is already south of Cuba as it continues to progress into its initial Earth parking orbit. Once it gets into that initial parking orbit, there will be a brief 4-second reignition of the second stage after it coasts up to apogee. That will finalize the deployment orbit, and then the OneWeb satellites themselves will deploy in 3 batches, and there we can see an orbital speed of 28,000 kilometers per hour. That is a good orbit for them. Today, you can see stage 2's position there south of Cuba and just to the southwest of Jamaica, headed toward Panama. But the OneWeb satellites will all deploy in 3 different batches. The first set of 14 will deploy 58 minutes and 28 seconds after launch. The next 2 batches will each be of 13 each and will deploy at 1 hour 13 minutes 53 seconds and 1 hour 29 minutes 18 seconds. And even though DOS is not on stream with us, this is DOS's favorite view on launch day, a happy, empty launch pad. There at 39A. And again, worth saying too, the first ever polar launch from either 39A or 39B. This mission achieved an orbital inclination of 87.4 degrees. The previous record had been set by Shuttle Atlantis at 63 degrees inclination. So a big mission all around here today.
One thing that I noticed.
How are you,
Oh,
Sawyer?
go ahead.
Let's ask Sawyer first how he's doing. Yeah.
I'm a little shaken because, and you're never going to believe this one. So for the landing part, we had the triple booms, the boom, ba boom. It then echoed 3 times, and then we got a triple squeal from the VAB from each of the booms.
Wow.
Yeah. So besides the fact it was gorgeous launch, the clouds right now, the colors on them still just so iridescent with the pinks and the oranges, and had the burns super clearly visible from here finally. Great up until the tree line here, so it didn't get to see leg deploy. But again, that triple sonic boom followed by at least 2 or 3 echoes, and then the craziest again being the triple squeal. So it was squeal, squeal from the VAB before the engine rumble of the landing.
And you know, RTLS's return to launch site landings are just immensely fun to watch when they happen. It's a great visual view of physics, and you know, you can also celebrate that by showing others your support for return to launch site landings, because you know we might also happen to have some RTLS merch. I think this is based on a photo that Pauline got of one of the Falcon 9s doing a return to launch site landing at Vandenberg. But that is Julia and Thomas modeling our wonderful models. Give them some love there for the RTLS merch. And I know Thomas was actually out there with one of the tracking cameras. Some of the views that we saw during the landing sequence was Thomas's manual tracking of that as well. So major shout out to Thomas there too for the work today and for getting all the robots out as well. But if you definitely want to share in our RTLS giddiness and also prepare yourself for the other RTLS landings that are coming this month as well, hop on over to shop.nasaspaceflight.com and get your own RTLS merch. And again, it's not too late for the holidays too. If you have that nephew like I was to my aunts and uncles that wouldn't shut up about space, this is something they would love. I can guarantee you that. Yes. Very, very good on that one. But what an absolutely spectacular and stunning launch. You know, we need to really give a shout out to Dr. WD40. There we go. And his tracking camera that was located south that we used, Michael and the amazing AI tracking there for the liftoff, and Thomas with some of the manual tracking there as well, and some of the back-end tracking that I'm sure was going on with our PTZ cameras on the roof there as well. Awesome tracking and awesome work there all around.
That's a weird shot.
That's an interesting shot.
Is that a Falcon Heaviside booster? What do you think, Chris?
Is
What's
that? I think that's our newest rocket entry to the Cape.
Oh.
I think that might be Terran 1, is it not?
Yeah, I think it is. Shiny white with a nose cone. It's a Terran 1. Yeah, this is the view that we have of that we had for the landing, but it happens to also have another rocket on the view.
Yeah. But yes, but anyway, back at 39A and the turn basin there, we have a happy and empty launch pad, and we have 40 OneWeb satellites in orbit now. So as we said, there'll be another quick burn at apogee for 4 seconds, and then the release of the payloads with the final batch of 13 OneWeb satellites releasing from the Falcon 9 second stage, 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 18 seconds after liftoff. So with that, I think that is largely going to... Oh, a few more things here really quick. Jim Cavett saying great work NSF, and Jim, thank you so much for the support. That was truly a team effort and a wonderful launch to be a part of. Chuck, thank you so much for the support. Really, really appreciate it there. Thomas is asking, can Orion be seen from Earth like we can see the ISS? Every time I look at the moon, I see a small dot next to it. I wish we could see Orion with the naked eye. I've not heard of anyone being able to see it with the naked eye, and it would be so faint at that distance. One of the reasons we're able to see the ISS is just how big it is and how reflective it is toward us. But very similarly, you can barely see the Hubble Space Telescope from the ground when it's in orbit. So, yeah, I wish we could, but no, not in that case. Mr. ACP, thank you so much for the support. We'll check out what that fast-moving thing was. They do have security helicopters that are out and about, as well as drones during launches. So we will check and see what that was and get back with you. Vanver, thank you so much for the support there. Yeah, SpaceX's other missions, some of them have hit some delays, but Hakuto R right now is targeting this weekend, Sunday, December 11th at 2, help me out, Adrian and Sawyer, 2:38 a.m. Eastern Time?
Wait.
Cool, we'll go with that. Early, around 2:30 a.m. Yes, Hakuto R.
It is,
2:38
a.m. Oh,
2:37?
2:37? Somewhere around there.
2:37 a.m.
Yes.
Yeah.
Give or take a minute or two, as long as you're there around that time, you'll be able to watch our live stream.
Oh, is that the flare stack?
Looks like. Looks like. Yes. Yeah, indeed. Well, the Cape is a very, very busy place here.
Oh yeah, I can see it from here. It is.
There's a lot of there are a lot of happenings. Might we say? It's a rocket ranch. I mean, it really is. I mean, earlier today, as the mobile launcher was rolling back, and OneWeb was going vertical at 39A, another Falcon 9 was getting hauled out to 39A for the next mission. So it's really all go at the Kennedy Space Center, but all good. And Chris Roberts, thank you so much for the support, saying awesome work. Casper, thank you so much. I flagged that. I'm going to look into your question there for you and see what we can do in terms of getting back to you on that. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Amazing work all around from the team. Alex, thank you so much for being on comms and taking us through part of the launch here today.
Always a pleasure, and oh man, that was such an amazing and cool launch today. It's always cool to see. It never gets old.
It never does. But Alex, thank you so much for joining us here on comms today. And Sawyer as well, thank you so much, and glad you got to witness that there in person.
Same. I mean, that's my 5th RTLS I've seen in person and 37th launch, which I know compared to your numbers are very low, but you still get that same heart race, that same is it gonna, and then that same excitement when it does go. And it's even giddier when you get that landing and the sonic booms. I can't even come up with a joke right now. That's how amazing it still is to me.
Yes, and yeah, I do have more launches, but I did have the birth advantage of where I was born, so I'll take that though.
Fair enough,
Um,
fair enough. But thank you everyone also for watching, and thank you for all the support so that we can come out here and do this.
Indeed. And thank you to Thomas, who is not on comm today, but was out with the 45th, getting us some of those manual tracking views of the booster coming back into land. Michael in the background, who is monitoring all of the AI tracking robots that worked wonderfully well today. Congratulations to Michael. As well, I know that that is really a labor of love in the software and the coding and the training of all of that. So I know that feeling of success he must be feeling right now, and hopefully we all feel that too, because those tracking views were amazing as well. To DOS, who was also in the back channels but not on screen, not on comms today. DOS, thank you so much for the support you were giving us as well, and to Dr. WD40, who provided some of those epic long-range tracking views as well. Also behind the scenes of pushing the buttons and pulling all the levers and making the photons flow to your screen wherever you are around the world was Mr. Kevin Michael Reed. Kevin, thank you so much for your support and your work for NSF as well. Thank you very much. And I was your host, Chris Gebhardt, the assistant managing editor for NASA Spaceflight, and what an absolutely incredible launch this was. We are going to kick you over to Starbase Live so you can continue to watch the pad and operations with the mobile launcher that are taking place, and also stay tuned for videos on YouTube a bit later from various views from this incredible launch of OneWeb Flight 15 today. Until next time, everyone, later, nerds.